Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature, photographing Borneo's nocturnal rainforest dwellers, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Brad Josephs. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Brad. I'm going to hand things off to you.
Okay, hey, thanks guys for logging on, and hopefully you enjoy this. It's kind of a narrow subject, but it's one that I like a lot. I really love being out in the rainforest at night, and I've been to, I think, every rainforest in the world, or the neotropics, and Borneo has always been my very favorite one, and I've been able to guide for NatHab in Borneo since 2015, and just fall in love with it more every day that I'm there. I've done several webinars on Borneo. One was I think just on orangutans, and because that's a huge topic, we're not going to talk about them very much today because they don't come out at night. Other primates of Borneo, conservation issues, but this one is just going to be photographing and then the biology of some of the cool critters that people don't even know existed. So just in case, a lot of people don't know where Borneo is or what it is the name of the third largest island in the world, and it's right here. I'm circling it. It's an enormous island, and it's made up of 3 countries. About 75% is the orange, which is Kalimantan, which is Indonesian Borneo, and the purple of the island is East Malaysia, or Malaysian Borneo, and it's about 20% of the island. And then if you look, there's a little tiny yellow dot, and that's Brunei, which is its own country. People have a lot of times hear about the Sultan of Brunei being so wealthy, and a lot of times people might think it's in the Middle East because it's extremely wealthy for oil reserves offshore. But that's where we concentrate our trips, is in the purple part in East Malaysia, made up of 2 different states, which is Sarawak and Sabah. And I just kind of run through real quick. Our itinerary is we start in Kuching, and it's got just a beautiful cultural flavor and very unique city, gorgeous city, the kind of old colonial style, just very peaceful, very diverse. And we do some activities there, and then we fly over to Sabah and explore this region here, which has got some of the most intact and pristine spots in Borneo as far as the rainforest goes. Just a side note, I had spent a month and a half back in around 2000 being the assistant to a orangutan researcher who was looking for, kind of doing preliminary scouting before she got her PhD in this region here, in Gunung Palong. So yeah, I'm very familiar with Borneo. I've been reading about Borneo since I was a little kid. I've been pretty much obsessed with it, and there's lots to talk about, but it's just let the numbers speak for themselves. It's because of how it's situated on the equator, and it's gone through a lot of different climate changes throughout 140 million years, but has been able to maintain rainforest status for 140 million years. So it's one of the world's oldest rainforests. So it's got some of the most complex, evolved relationships. I mean, 15,000 species of flowers, 3,000 trees, 221 species of mammals, 450 of birds, 440 of freshwater fish. So it's 6% of the world species and 1% of the area. So we are talking about as diverse ecosystem as anywhere in the world. And I'm not going to talk about the conservation issues because there's a long story, and that's a whole separate webinar on itself. But that's another thing that makes me really driven to help programs like this succeed, because especially in the developing world, when we're dealing with habitat loss, we're dealing with climate change problems, which are happening big time in the tropics as well. In developing nations, you have to put a value on these ecosystems. And sustainable tourism is golden for preserving these areas. So yeah. So I just another image of Borneo in the Danam Valley, overlooking the Danam Valley and the Borneo Rainforest Lodge, where we go, and most of the great night photography experiences and sightings are here. And there's one of my groups, we've had so many wonderful trips in Borneo. People just absolutely love it. And there we are. We do lots of hiking during the day, in the early morning, and then in the late afternoon hours. You know, a lot of easy walks, but we split the group up, and there's just so much to see. You don't have to go very far, and you can see 20 different amazing things. But this all during the day. And we also get up into the canopy walkway. There's Barbara. I don't know if she's out there. She watches a lot of these webinars. She's been on several trips of mine. And so there she is up in the canopy walkway. And I know you guys have questions, because one of the things about Borneo that scares people a lot is leeches. And for some people, it's a deal breaker. Even the word leech means they don't want to go. But really, leeches are not a big deal. And this is how we make sure it's not a big deal, is we have these special leech socks that we tie up, and then we just put some good insect repellent. So leeches here are not in the water, they're on the ground. And there's two species, the brown and then the tiger leech. And when you're in the canopy, or I'm sorry, not in the canopy, but when you're down on the forest floor, they will track you down and climb up your shoe, and then they cannot get into your pants. Then they continue on looking for an entry point into your clothes, and then they hit the insect repellent and they drop off. So it's very easy to deal with them. Even if every once in a while, one of us will get a leech. I'll get a bunch over the years, and it's not a big deal. It's just, you just pull them off, put some Band-Aids on, and it's no big deal. But anyway, that's the leech story that I know people are going to be asking about. I can probably see all the people watching are starting to drop off when we talk about that. But yeah, Borneo is just a mountainous island, incredible wilderness. And before the 1980s, it was basically civilization had not even penetrated any of the interior. So, but since then, it's definitely suffered some of the worst habitat loss on Earth. We also go to the Kinabatangan River, which is a strip of beautiful, which has been touted often as the best place in Southeast Asia to view wildlife. And that's all this kind of swamp and forest. And so we travel up and down by boat in the Kinabatangan. So when you go to Borneo, and we'll get, you know, I'm going to just talk about the biology of the animals, tell some stories, but I'm going to be throwing in some photography tips as well along the way. The first thing when you're in Borneo, you can see it's a rainforest, so you get a tremendous amount of rain, but usually only in really intense showers during the day. And when we run our trips in the spring and the fall, say May and June, and then say late August into September, it's the driest. Those are the dry seasons. So it's really doesn't affect our trips at all, but we'll get some pretty intense thunderstorms every once in a while. You'll also have to deal with the humidity. A lot of people want to know how do I take care of my camera in humid conditions? And well, when you're photographing in the cold, like if I'm guiding an aurora trip and it's -30, you basically do the reverse in the rainforest. So when you're outside, your camera gets very cold, and when you go back inside into a warm room, you've got this much more humidity in the air, and that hot, humid air in the room will hit your glass. And until that temperature of your glass warms up to ambient temperature of the room, you will continue to get, it'll even freeze on that super cold glass, and you'll continue to get condensation, and that's moisture, and that's not good for your camera. And until you get that temperature humidity difference resolved, you can wipe off the fog, but it just comes right back. So what you do is you seal, before you go inside, you seal it up with a Ziploc, so that when you bring it inside, the temperature will go to the room temperature, but it won't be exposed to that super high humidity in the heated room, or wherever we are in Churchill. Well, the opposite happens. So if everywhere, when I first started guiding this trip, we had several places we had no air conditioning, because this remote areas, and it was but now everywhere we go has air conditioning, and that's actually the biggest enemy for photographing in the rainforest, because if your camera is out inside and it's cool to say 68 degrees and relatively extremely dry compared to what it is outside. So as soon as you take your camera outside, you've got this 90-degree air that's super humid that is condensing on the colder glass, and so you get lots of condensation. So the way to alleviate that is, before you go outside, generally like maybe an hour before we go out on an excursion, seal it up in something where it's airtight, and then just let it acclimate to get to that temperature before it's exposed to that humidity. So hopefully that makes sense. So this is my go-to for a camera bag. It's just it's a Grundon's dry bag backpack, and I of course use it in Katmai because we're on the beach and there's wet areas and it might rain, and so definitely being a sealed dry bag is very key. Then the other thing I can do is just seal it up on the inside in the air conditioned room, and so then air is not really getting to the interior of it, and then I can just put the whole dry bag outside, and it can acclimate, as I was saying. So that's my favorite way. And then I've got these easy access pockets, for things like water and bug spray and stuff like that, or headlamps and flashlights and things like that. So that's a lot of people, yeah, it's much better than bringing a backpack that you think is waterproof, because when it rains in Borneo, it really rains. It's like fire hose. And having like a backpack rain cover, generally doesn't do it. So this is how I have evolved my behaviors to save my gear. So really during the day, we're going after the charismatic megafauna that really brings people to the trip. So it's orangutans, and again, it's tough to but that's not what this webinar is about. But we do spend we go to several different places, two locations to view orangutans purely in the wild, and we have great success. And then we have two other locations where they're out in the jungle, but they are basically learning how to be wild again, and they come into these feeding platforms for supplemental food. So there's kind of orangutan rehabilitation centers, and yeah, so that's really the draw of the trip. But there's all these other crazy primates, diurnal animals that we go see, such as the proboscis monkey. And the males of the proboscis monkey have these huge noses, just because female proboscis monkeys think males with a big nose is attractive. So they evolved this sexually dimorphic characteristic that is quite interesting. So yeah, I could talk about proboscis monkeys for a long time as well. And then you've got the more elusive, very special. There's several species of gibbons in Asia, but that's the gray gibbon that in the wildest area of the Danum Valley, that's one of our big targets, is to go out really early in the morning when the family units are calling, and we can locate them by hearing, and then find out where they are and be able to catch a glimpse of this incredibly special primate that basically lives in a little group of just mom, dad, and baby. But there's the diversity of primates. It's an amazing primate trip, such as these red leaf monkeys, also called red langurs. And this is basically taken from the restaurant, the outdoor restaurant at the Danum Valley, the Borneo Rainforest Lodge. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. Or the silver langur, who's probably the coolest aspect, or the bright orange babies that they have, and then after about a year they turn silver. We go to they're in areas where there are wild sun bears, but I've never actually seen one in the wild, but we've had some sightings, and they're just incredibly rare and incredibly elusive. But we do get to learn about them at the Sun Bear Rehabilitation Center, where they are, again, also in giant jungle enclosures, learning how to be wild again, so they can be re-released into the wild. I did a whole separate webinar on that topic, where we had Dr. Wong join me and presented that project. But obviously love sun bears, and be able to get happy sun bears in the jungle doing their thing is just fantastic. Another charismatic animal during the day is the pygmy elephant. On the Kinabatangan River, we view them by boat as they come down to the water to play and drink in the afternoon. This is a very special. You hear pygmy elephant, you think, oh, must be tiny. They're about 2 feet on average shorter than an African elephant, so they're still enormous. But very special, extremely endangered animals, and it's just incredible to see an elephant in the rainforest instead of out on the savanna or the plains, where we're used to seeing them. So pygmy elephants, yeah. So the Bornean bearded pig, which I think is the coolest looking wild boar, with these huge whiskers that help it get through the thorny brush to look for food. But what do these animals do during the nighttime? So this is an orangutan nest, and so orangutans are like us, very similar. They don't see in the dark very well at all, and they don't operate at night. They every day they will spend about 15 minutes and build a huge nest every night, where they will sleep in. And so orangutans disappear in their nests as the sun goes down, just about 5:30, 6 o'clock. The other primates, such as the proboscis monkey, will go out onto a branch overlooking the river, and then they will sleep with their face facing the branch towards the tree, so that their biggest predators, which are clouded leopards, there's no way they can sneak up on them. In the worst case scenario, they just jump into the water, and hopefully there's no crocodiles there, and it's a better chance than having to deal with a leopard. So that's what those guys do at night. But there are two species of primates that are nocturnal, and I think that's probably one of the neatest things. It's difficult to find these guys, but man, when you can, so this is a tarsier, and it can see in the dark because it's got enormous eyes for the body, so it can see in the dark just fine. It's just like your camera having a 2.8 or a 1.4 aperture. It's got a huge hole pupil that can let lots and lots of light in, so they can actually operate in the dark. And they're just fascinating creatures. They're difficult to find because they don't have, just like we don't, eye shine. Eye shine is for animals that are nocturnal that have what's called a tapetum lucidum, which is a reflective layer in the back of the eye, which kind of helps collect light. It's almost like boosting your ISO up to 10,000, I guess, or something like that. But these guys don't have the tapetum lucidum, so our local guides will find them by smell. They smell like, I heard one of my local guides, they smell like a drowned grasshopper. Well, whatever that smells like, but they do. But they're tiny little guys and look how big the legs are for the body. And they basically jump around like acrobats in the lower canopy, which makes it easier for us to encounter them. Going after insects, cicadas, lizards, frogs, and they'll even intercept bats in the air. So this is a primate. It's actually truly unbelievable. And they have suction cups on their fingertips so that they can grip the tree better. They can rotate their head all the way around behind them so they can see behind them. The natives used to have a superstition that if you ever saw a tarsier, that you were going to lose your head, because that culture was in the old days, not anymore, is a head hunting culture. And so they thought that was a real bad omen. But this is the range of the Philippine, Western, and Eastern tarsier. So of course we're in Borneo, so we're going to be looking at the Western tarsier. Okay, so about how to photograph this stuff. Now, yes, a lot of people photograph wildlife and things at night using a flash, and that's definitely possible. But I choose not to use a flash, because if I had everybody in the group trying to pop flashes off, boom, 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 it would be too distracting and too obnoxious for everybody in the group to enjoy seeing this animal. And it's also, I believe it's definitely that flash of light is more disruptive. It's also can be more difficult. So what I choose to do, and it works better in a lot of ways, you just get a different quality of photograph, is we just use kind of low power LED headlamps or flashlights that aren't that severe on the eyes for the animal. We don't shine directly into the eyes, but you can light them up enough so that your camera can get a focus point, and it doesn't bother the animal too much. And also the people that aren't photographing, because a lot of people, when they go out at night, it's just enough for them to take just to enjoy, and then let me take the pictures of the animal and give it to them, rather than fumble around in the dark. And I'm happy to do that. And so, but if 6 of us were popping flashes off, instead of just lighting it up with a nice warm LED light, it just wouldn't work out. So generally I'm not going to talk about the techniques of using flash. And for me, it's just, I don't need it, because I mean, you look at these images are just fine. And then, you can just adjust the shadows and the light angles much easier. It's just always good for somebody to kind of be there to help you. It's a lot harder when you're trying to do it by yourself, but it's definitely possible. But here's the same tarsier with different kind of light. This is more of a bulb flashlight, and then this is an LED, so you can just see. And I can also change that effect later in post-processing with my white balance. That's just a cooler light that we're using, and this is a warmer light. So yeah, you can actually adjust the quality of light and whatever you like the best. Okay, so that's the tarsier, a really amazing creature. This is the other primate that's nocturnal. It's the slow loris. And hopefully we're always lucky enough to find one of these guys. They're easier to find than the tarsier because even though it's a primate, it's the only primate with a tapetum lucidum. So you can locate them by scanning through the canopy and the eye shine. And they're not, I mean, they will eat a lot of different things, but they're more herbivorous. And this guy has basically chewed holes in the bark and lets the sap leak out and comes and just like tapping a maple tree, you come back to the hole and there's more sap. And he's got his little feeding sites that he walks up and down and licks that sap for sugar. You can see he's chewed off a lot of the inner bark as well. This creature is pretty phenomenal because it's a primate, but it's a venomous primate. They have poison glands in the armpits. And what they will do is if they feel threatened, they will just lick those poison glands. When it mixes with saliva, it becomes very toxic. So it actually has a poisonous bite when they need to. And then if they have a baby and they don't want it to get preyed upon, they will use that mixture that they lick from their armpit and then lick the baby and cover it in poison. So it's just crazy creatures, you know. And so yeah, it's amazing. You should see that the feet can rotate so we can climb down back head first. These animals are extremely endangered because if you catch them and you cut their teeth off, and I don't know, I haven't had well, anyway, people catch them for pets, and the demand for the pets, lorises, because they are very cute and they can be tamed, but it's just very cruel because they don't want to be a pet. They don't want to be in a cage, but they're so cute. And people have their social media, you know, of them on the beach in Thailand with a loris that somebody gave them to hold for some money, and then that pet trade has kind of exploded, and it's a very, very sad issue there. Okay, so one of the really amazing things about the canopy of Borneo, it's very different than other rainforests, is it's a very uneven canopy. So you've got lots of emergent trees that are taller than other ones. So in lots of the fruits and different foods that these animals need are going to be concentrated up in the canopy. So if you're going to be moving through the canopy, it's virtually very difficult. A lot of times, if you want to get up to a certain tree, you have to climb all the way down to the bottom, and then walk on the ground, and then climb up the other one because the canopies are different levels. Well, that's why you have this fantastic array of gliding animals to take out. And so this is an image at night of it's called a flying lemur, although it's not a lemur. It's in its own family called Dermoptera, and Dermoptera means basically skin wing. And it's got these, just think like a flying squirrel, I'll show you next, but they've got these huge flaps of skin. And so they have the biggest patagium, which is these flaps of skin, of any animal for its size. So they can, when they get up to the top of a tree, they can just launch, and it's just like a hang glider and just cruise on. Now you can see I got this guy, this one has got a little baby, which was really, really special to see this one at night. Now these are very nocturnal because these animals, such as these guys, and then the flying squirrels, which is this red giant flying squirrel, they don't run around very well because they don't have, that patagium gets in the way. So they're not very great at escaping. The only thing they can really do is glide away from a predator. And although there are owls, owls don't seem to go after them in the air as much. But during the daytime, the aerial raptors, such as all the different hawks, they would just never be able to survive during the day, gliding around and feeding. They would get picked off too easily. So they, just like the flying squirrel and the flying lemur, have both gone fully nocturnal. It's very difficult because when they become active, it's almost dark. So it's very, very tough to get a shutter speed fast enough to photograph one that's gliding before it gets totally dark. And so that's why if you do, I mean, it's important to have a camera that can deal with a very, very high ISO. Such as this is just getting dark, and because my camera has such a great ISO tolerance. I think I shot this at about 20,000 ISO. My Sony A9 can go to 200,000. It's a crazy number, but even though it was just very, very dark, I was able to get a shutter speed fast enough to compensate for any kind of movement that it was my hands, because I was hand holding. So anyway, so when you're doing this kind of low light stuff, you really need to think about a camera that can deal with very high ISOs. And all the new cameras nowadays are very, very, very leaps and leaps and bounds ahead of the older generation cameras and their ISO tolerance. And you can see the downside of having a really high ISO like 10,000 is that there's usually going to be a lot of grain. And that's why this picture doesn't look totally crystal clear sharp. But boy, it's the best shot I've ever gotten of a giant flying squirrel. And there's really not much grain there. And of course, in Lightroom, in the post-processing, you can take care of whatever grain is there as well. So there's lots of other cool animals like this beautiful Malay civet. And so we're walking. We're also doing some drives or in the boats, depending on where we are, to go out and look for all these creatures that you'd never see during the daytime. And yeah, we just have to be really careful. We don't just shine super bright lights at them the whole time, and we gauge whether it's bothering them or not. But usually we just kind of, basically the main part of the beam will be offset from the animal, so they're lit up enough to see and photograph in low light, but definitely not bothering the animal. And if we ever do look like they are getting bothered, then we just take a quick look and then go on. But this is a masked palm civet. So there's a Malay badger. It's actually closely related to the skunks. And this guy was poking through in the Danum Valley, going through insects and stuff. And I was so excited because I love badgers and mustelets, weasel family. But he he didn't really know what was going on, and I was just waiting for him to come up, and he got very close. He looked at me, then he just casually turned around and sprayed me. So it wasn't as bad as our American skunks, but it was definitely interesting. It was a good experience. This is a crazy one. This is a mouse deer, and you can see this guy is about probably 12 inches tall. It's a lesser mouse deer, I think. And then you can see here they've got canine teeth, almost like reverse tusks that the males will use during the mating battles. So just people come to see the orangutans, but then they get to see all this amazing diversity as long as they go out at night. This is a leopard cat, and it didn't seem to bother. I mean, what I love to do is after a good rainstorm, about 5 p.m., 6 p.m., after the rain stops, we eat dinner, go out after that. And when it gets really wet, frogs have become very active, and these cats love frogs, and they actually will walk up and down and the trails that we use as well. This is the best shot that I've gotten of a leopard cat. There's other cat species that live in Borneo, and I've yet to see the clouded leopard, although there definitely are sighted from time to time. And we've had lots and lots of leopard cat sightings at virtually almost every trip. And this is the flat-headed cat, which is a cat that lives on the water going after fish, and mostly fish and frogs. And I've seen several of those guys. I haven't been able to get a great image of them, but so these are some of the predators that live. Okay, so but one of my favorite aspects about photographing at night are the frogs. I am a frog fanatic. I love them. I fell in love with them many years ago because I love the sounds they make. That's one of the reasons I love living in Arkansas. I moved from Alaska. Is in the springtime and the summer, we have 2 ponds on our property, and it's just the sweetest sound in the world. But anyway, this is the Wallace's flying frog. So remember I was talking about the animals that glide? Well, this is a flying frog, and basically, and this is just a beautiful, very rare frog. And you can see, like, I was able to just use a soft light, and a flash would have just illuminated everything in a very kind of a one-dimensional light. And but this is kind of a moody, edgy, eerie light, and I did that on purpose, just with an offset light angle from not a very strong LED headlamp. So, but this frog and all the other flying frogs basically, this is not my picture. This was probably taken in a studio, but I have to show it to you. When I say flying frog, this is what I mean, is they spread their feet out and they're just like a hang glider, but in with just these like webbed feet, but they're not made for swimming. They're webbed for gliding. So pretty fantastic. And then we've got the beautiful, probably the most easy to find is the harlequin flying frog. Now, so the biggest trick, it's very, very tricky to expose correctly when you're photographing like this. But when I figured out the best way to do it is to spot meter, that is when everything became much, much easier. Because as I talked about in my last webinar about photographing silhouettes, in the dawn, if you've got, but it's a little bit of the opposite. You have all this black instead of the background being a sunset that's bright, and you're trying to photograph a dark subject that's not illuminated so much. Well, so this is the opposite. You've got all this darkness in the background. So if you were to shoot evaluative metering, it would take an average of all the light in the picture. And so the stuff that's actually illuminated, that's the minority of the composition, is going to get totally blown out. So the best thing to do is to spot meter. And all you need to do is just, you set the camera up so that the spot metering will take around your focus point. And if you're just metering on the frog itself, you're all set. So that's very, very important, is the spot metering. And then you just can work on your composition. And there's just a million ways. So there's a frog pond in the Denham Valley that's just full of these frogs around. And so you make use at a smaller level, a micro level of, instead of a river being your leading line, you can have it the vein of a leaf being your leading line. And it's just very, very important to control your focus point with single point focus. So I just want to make sure that the frog's face is in focus. You guys may ask, a lot of these images were shot with, I would say, the best lens to have for these sort of things is likely, especially for a group that's walking in the forest, is a 70 to 200 2.8. The 2.8 is going to allow you to get, well, first of all, this beautiful shallow depth of field to really, really isolate that subject and blur the rest of the background out. There's another kind of leading line that goes back here. But it's also that 2.8 is going to gather a lot of light. So if I was shooting at f8, a lens that only went to f5.6, my shutter speed would not be nearly as fast as if I'm able to take it all the way down to f2.8. So that 2.8 is a bigger hole in the aperture, lets in more light per unit of time, so I'm able to get sharper pictures. But now I don't have a 70 to 200 2.8 anymore. I use a 1 to 400, and I still do very well. But I'll tell you about the other lens that I sometimes use. But it's really good because, like, when we locate these creatures, I'm not on the trip to take pictures for myself. I'm in the background helping people find this stuff and helping. I'm not going to be in their way. And so I want them to be able to look and get their, they're taking pictures themselves. But if I have a 70 to 200, I can stand in the back and zoom right up on them and get these really, really cool images like this. And even though maybe the frog is 6 or 7 feet away, I have a 2.8 aperture, so I can still blur the background out and really isolate these subjects. You can see that this is a flying frog, that there's those huge pads for gliding curled up among the feet. And yeah, they're just beautiful, the harlequin flying frog. Yeah, and these are all with the 70 to 200. Now, here's a fantastic frog. I've only seen it once. There's about 100 species of frogs and toads in Borneo, but it's called the jade tree frog. And it's translucent. So if you shine the light from the other side, you can actually see through the body, and it looks like jade. This is the paddy frog. It lives closer towards rivers and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you're looking at the composition. It's just like, I was talking about with bears and landscapes, and there's a bear with a glacier in the back. Well, you just think about it as smaller, like here's a bit of a leading line as the branch that blurs off into the darkness. And because I'm spot metered on the frog, even though 90% or 95% of the picture is black, what the camera would do in evaluated metering is it would say, oh, this is really dark. I'm going to bump your shutter speed up to really long, like 1/8 of a second. And it's still not going to come out very good. It's going to be blurry, and that frog will be totally overexposed in that light. So it's really, really important. I'd love to have that black background, but get a proper exposure on the subject. This is the giant river frog. And again, sorry, buttons. This is one of the things that I talk about with, if you can, I mean, it's difficult with a frog that's on the ground. It's easier with a leaf, but the perspective, I mean, I got down on my belly to get an eye level perspective of this frog, which is pretty cool. Again, control your focus point, because otherwise, how does the camera know that you wanted that frog instead of this part of the leaf? So yeah, I mean, I just really love these frogs. This is the file-eared tree frog. And I love the vegetation in the back as well. Blurred out, nice. So yeah, I mean, as far as how close I am to the frog, I need to think about my depth of field. I mean, I guess as long as the face is in focus, to me, it's okay. But you have to think about your depth of field. That's why this is definitely an aperture priority operation, because you really need to control your depth of field. You're using that depth of field to make beautiful bokeh and blur in the background. You're also using that low aperture in order to gather enough light so that you can shoot a sharp shot without having to, your ISO doesn't have to be to the moon. And it depends on your lens, and it depends on how far away that subject is from you, based on what depth of field you really need. So yeah, a lot of times I'll just take a picture and then look and, oh, I'm going to take it up to f4 because I want the rest of the body of the frog in focus. There's a 4-line tree frog. This is only a once. I've only seen one of these, and a lot of the other the local guides had only seen it maybe once or twice in their life. The cinnamon frog. So just fantastic forest, so much great diversity. Mahogany frog. And so I was able to go to this really special, famous kind of mountain place by myself before trip started called Kuba, which is outside of Kuching. And I hired a ranger to take me to find some of the rarest frogs and the most beautiful. This is the mahogany frog. This has got to be one of my favorites. It's the horned frog. And it basically, the coolest thing about this guy is it's virtually invisible. You can just barely, when you're shining your light in the leaf litter, if you're really good, you might be able to pick up a tiny little speckle. But otherwise, I mean, they are hard to find. But the only time you ever even know they're there, because they're invisible in the leaves, is right before it rains. They make this, and then just do it once, like every 10 minutes. And it's like there's a 95% chance that it is going to rain in the next few minutes. They're like I don't know, there's something about the humidity. They just know the dew point. They know it's going to rain. And when you hear that, you better get your stuff together because it's going to be raining. So here was a time where I wasn't with my group. I was just me and a ranger. The ranger could hold my light for me. And then so this is when I used my 16 to 35 2.8 and got down close. The frogs aren't really scared. He's pretty convinced that I don't even know he's there, but I can get very close to these frogs. And the 16 to 35 2.8, whether it's Canon or Nikon or Sony, is a fantastic lens if you can get close enough up to the subject. But in a group, I'm not going to get that close because we have a group of 5 or 6 people, or everybody to see it. But as long as I'm not disturbing the animal. So I had just a fantastic photo shoot just on my own in the mountains one night. So yeah, you can think about, if you go to Borneo and you love this kind of stuff, you can, if I'm your guide, just, maybe I show up a few days early and we can go up to Kuba and find some of these fantastic frogs. So these are all harlequin flying frogs. Lots of frogs. And this is some kind of puddle frog. I can't remember the name. So using that LED light, I actually take it out during the day because this is actually not shot at night, but it's so dark under the canopy. A lot of times, I mean, this image came out perfectly just because I just took my flashlight out and just illuminated it so everybody was able to get a much better picture. This is a crested agamid lizard. This is the giant forest gecko. This guy can get up to be 2 or 3 feet long. This is the flying gecko. And you're in Danum Valley, when you're eating, you just look up in the ceiling and sometimes you'll be able to see these guys. I mean, it's a gecko that has the same kind of feet as the flying frogs. So it can just, I was walking through the lodge one time and all of a sudden I felt something hit me. And it was a flying gecko. It just flew from the wall over and just landed on my backpack. And it was incredible. And so the whole group got to see it fly to the next post and got to see it take a jump and spread its feet out and just sail about 5 times longer than you would expect they'd be able to go. So some gorgeous snakes as well. And I mean, this is a oriental vine snake. And I just love it. I love the depth of field. It's, I mean, just enough to get the face in focus. And then because I'm close to the snake, it's not poisonous, able to have this kind of leading line blurring off in the distance. It shows me that I'm using depth of field, that I've got a good quality lens, and then I'm close. And it's a very multi-dimensional sort of image. This is the keeled pit viper. And this one is poisonous, but it's a beautiful snake and extremely non-aggressive. And they're very easy to find. Well, they're not easy to see. They're very camouflaged, but we always see several, and they're just a fantastically beautiful snake to photograph. And then at night is my favorite time because I can have that black background really accentuate. And this was one that was in a tree, just kind of waiting for a lizard or a frog to come by. And then around the frog ponds, this is the red-sided keeled snake. Yeah. I'll think about it. And I just looked it up recently, but this one is beautiful snake. It hunts in the water, but gorgeous colorations. And in the rivers, there are crocodiles. They're basically invisible during the day, but at night they just pop up, and we can see them in boats. And again, just as long as you got a single point focus and you're spot metering on the eyes, you pretty much got it. And this one is an enormous saltwater estuarine crocodile. Something like, it was like over 20 feet long and old. He's got no teeth left. But when you're that big, you don't even need teeth. You just swallow whatever you want. Yeah, so it's and then we do a stopover one night at an island, a tropical atoll offshore, where we get to watch the rangers collect the eggs from when the females come up, because they take the eggs and put them in a nursery. It increases the survival rate of the eggs much greater. And then after they hatch, about 45 to 55 days later, we get to the clutches that have already hatched. We get to watch them go into the ocean at night, so they get a big jump on that high predation rate and helps their conservation. So getting to watch these little guys make their way to the ocean. So yeah, nighttime is pretty cool in Borneo. And amazingly, birds sleep, and we do encounter some pretty fantastic chances to photograph birds at night as well. Like this is the ultimate Borneo bird. This is the most famous. It's the rhinoceros hornbill. So yeah, it was up there sleeping. We shined it for a second. We were able to get a couple shots and get a couple good looks, and if you're ever and then we didn't want to bother them, so we just turned the lights off and let them rest again. And let's say that you don't want to take regardless, if you're ever doing this kind of stuff at night, wherever you are, bring your binoculars. Absolutely. It seems like binoculars at night, but you can really zoom in and get a great view of these, whoever your guide is illuminating these animals. Is definitely bring your binoculars so you get a really nice view. And then on the rivers, the kingfishers such as this beautiful stork-billed kingfisher, they basically sleep right above on the branches above the river. Blue-eared kingfisher. You can't get this close to these guys, and they never sit still during the day, but this is another stork-billed kingfisher. It's fantastic. And then the owls. This is the Oriental bay owl, and it's amazing because it, unlike some of the other owls, it likes to sit, hunt in the mid canopy. So just about 10 feet high. So you'd be walking along and all of a sudden there's just one sitting there staring at you on the branch. So yeah, this is Oriental bay owl. This is another one that's suffering from people wanting to catch them as pets in the wild. Yeah, and just like I said, I really like, instead of having a flash that illuminates, I'm not saying you can't get, in some ways, better stuff with a flash. It's just not appropriate, in my opinion, and not needed. You can just have different kinds of moody, edgy quality, and I can just light up the owl. And so if it was a flash, it would probably light up all this rest of the background. But remember, what I love the most is having the rest of the background black, so you really accentuate. It's almost like being in a studio with these guys. And the better your camera is with a high ISOs, the better you'll be able to do. You're going to be able to get faster shutter speeds and lower light. Wow, this is the Buffy fish owl. And I think it's the most beautiful eyes in any animal in nature. It's just fantastic. So this is like an osprey, it's a fish-eating owl that sits along the rivers at night and catches fish. And the eyes are just fantastic, huh? This is the brown wood owl. It's not a great shot. It was too high up. But yeah, just some of the owl diversity. This is what we do. And the insects. So I'm gonna, I didn't think I was gonna run out of time today, but I'm gonna fly through the insects real quick here. And one of the things, I think, if I'm gonna say like, what is my favorite rainforest in the world and why? It's Borneo. Now, are the other rainforests like in the Central America and other places are just as incredible? You get some fantastic frogs and beautiful stuff. But what I love about Borneo so much is the sounds. And the sounds of the cicada. So turn up your volume and listen to this eerie, the 6 o'clock cicada and the imperial cicadas calling. It's just, I get chills down my spine when I hear these guys. Just the sounds of the Borneo rainforest is it's in a class by itself. So now what I do is, this was just shot with my iPhone, but I have there you go. Next time I go, I'm gonna bring a really high quality sound recorder to capture this. Okay, now this one's wild. This is the David Bowie huntsman spider. And you're thinking, what is he talking about? And it's true. There was an entomologist that it was only discovered in the 1980s, and found this guy and thought that his face of the spider looked like David Bowie in one of his kind of crazy music videos. Thought I had, maybe I forgot to put it in. Yeah, I had a picture of the description so that you knew I wasn't making it up, but it is a David Bowie huntsman spider. Okay. What's happening? This is a purple tarantula. Oops, sorry. There we go. Beautiful. This is just the size of some of these cicadas. Can be just enormous. There's one of them was on the door of one of the clients, and when we were walking back, she was like, oh my gosh, it's on the screen. She just asked me to help her relocate it to a better place, but look how big this thing is. It's incredible. So up in the canopy after it rains, there are tree crabs that will climb out. I'm talking that you see these when you're up in the canopy walkways. Sometimes we'll go up there at night, and after it's been a good rain, the first time I saw it, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, we're talking about crabs that live at the tops of trees. I mean, only in Borneo. Oh, here it is. Here's the David Bowie. There we go. Heteropoda David Bowie. There's some different colorations. This one's from Singapore. Horned spider. My favorite, most beautiful bug on earth, bar none, the lantern bug. And this one, this is just a display, but how they actually eat, they have a proboscis or a mouth part that drills in and they eat the inner saps of the bark, the inner sap of the tree. But I mean, that's just something like, it's just out of this world gorgeous. This is the hammerhead worm. It's probably not people's favorite, but I think it's fascinating. But it's not the greatest picture, but it has these kind of sensors in this hammerhead, and the mouth is actually back in here, and it hunts earthworms. Now, if you ever see one of these in your yard, they're native to Southeast Asia. There's a bunch of different species of them. But if you're in the United States and you're in Georgia, they're very, 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 very invasive. They don't want them around. They're also poisonous. Not really enough if you touched one to bother you, but you wouldn't want to eat it, or anything else to eat it. Anyway, they are supposedly like a pretty bad risk for being an invasive species. Somebody saw one in Virginia that was 2 feet long, thought it was a kind of snake, and then Atlanta's had a big outbreak of them. So if you see one of these, you probably want to get rid of it. But you don't want to cut it in half, because you can actually cut these guys up 1/300th of its length, and every part will regenerate. These are the phasmids. There are 300 different species of the group called the phasmids, which phasmid is like, phasma is a Greek word meaning phantom. And so they're just very, very cryptic. So this is a stick insect. And they really are, they just look like sticks. There's another stick insect. And I've seen these guys be up to like, gosh, maybe almost 2 feet long. All right, I'm getting to a close here, and I love scorpions, but here's a really cool trick. There's something called a scorpion light, which is, and I order them on the internet, and and this is a scorpion up in there's a shelter, and it's up in the corner at night. It's a huge one. But if you turn all the lights off and you turn on the scorpion light, this is what it looks like. We were on a boardwalk doing a night walk, and I asked the local ranger, I said, you see scorpions very much here? He said, no. He said, if you go back in there into the stumps, maybe, but no. And then I turned the light on, the scorpion light, and then he never knew. He'd been working there for 20 years. In between every single crack in the wood was a tiny scorpion. But the only way you could, even with the other light, you couldn't see it. They just disappeared. They're very shy. But when I turn on the scorpion light, you realize that between here and 30 yards down that way, there's 200 of them. He's a guy that lived in the forest his whole life. Never knew they existed. Okay, that's my last slide. Here's my little thing. I got a blog for NatHab. It's Alaska Bears and Wolves, and then my Instagram photos is Brad Joseph's photos on Instagram, where I post most of my best stuff. So if you want to look at more things like that for me, there you can go there. Kendall, are you still out there?
I'm here.
All right, I guess we can do questions. You can
Okay,
stick
great.
around, listen to the questions. I'm going to be going through a whole bunch of other pictures from Borneo that I haven't shown yet. So
Wonderful. All right. Well, we do have some good questions for you. And I just want to remind everyone watching, if you have a question for Brad, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. Okay, we've got some good trip related questions, some Borneo in general questions, and some photography questions. So I'll try to group those together for you. So trip related questions. How physically challenging is this trip? What kind of shape do you need to be in?
you don't have to be in great shape at all. What we did, the only place that we really were physically challenged is this place called Danum Valley, and we will always split the group up. So it's myself as a guide, and then we've got 2 local guides that are Dannon Valley guides. So we can split it even up to even 3 different parts. So there's a lot of times I'll do the hard hike early in the morning to get up at dawn and look for gibbons. That's a very difficult a hike that's very steep. But the other guys will go with another guide, and so we just split it up really well that way. So that's the only time where we're really hiking now. Now the trip has been listed at times as moderate because it's the heat and the humidity. So just imagine it's similar weather conditions to like if you were in Louisiana or Florida or Houston, Texas in August. So that can be challenging for some people. But as far as like mobility goes, you can basically do most of the whole trip just easy walking, boat rides, and then if you're up for more challenging hikes, you can do it. We split it up.
Great. And
Okay.
earlier you mentioned a dry and wet season. Could you just repeat what that is?
Yeah, so we run our trips in the springtime, kind of early summer. So it would be May, around May. You can just check the catalog for the dates, but anytime around that May, early June. And then again, it's like mid-August to late September is our other window. That's the driest.
Okay. So I'll get into some wildlife questions. Could you repeat the name of the loris that has the poison glands?
Oh yeah, it's just the slow loris.
All right. And there's a
In
lot of
Sri Lanka,
go
there's a different kind of loris in Sri Lanka called the slender loris. The one that lives in
ahead.
Borneo is called the slow loris. Go
Okay,
ahead.
got it. So there's some curiosity about mosquitoes or other biting insects that people should be aware of.
Very, very little problems. Leeches is the only one that people are really worried about. When we go into you almost never see mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are very well controlled in these pristine habitats because there are so many predators that eat them. So it's not like swarms of mosquitoes in Alaska. And although, to be honest, the doctors say you need to take malaria pills because there's been some malaria down in the Indonesian part of Borneo. I never take malaria meds. Now you got to make your own decision based on your doctor. But usually I just tell my folks, I never take malaria medicine here. There's just areas where we go, there's not. But we just protect ourselves really easily with long sleeve shirts, and there's just in the evening you can get some mosquitoes, but it's not a very big deal.
Okay, great. And how many different types of frogs do you typically see on a trip to Borneo?
I'm going to guess around maybe 10 or 15 different species. Just depends.
And are there poisonous snakes that someone should look out for?
No, I've never. The only one we ever see is the wagglers, and they pretty much are hanging in the trees, and they don't. You can get 5 feet from them, and they don't even move. So that's the only one really that we see very often. They have cobras and stuff there, but they generally live in the farmlands and in the more open areas, the cleared areas. And I've never actually seen any of those cobras, so it's not a problem. Now remember, yes, I mean it's a jungle. Any of the trips we go, I mean there's going to be some things that are hostile to humans, but that's what our job is, just to make sure that you guys are kept very safe. So you're not only, it's not just me there with you. You've got local guides that grew up in the jungle, and they know how to avoid everything that would hurt you.
All right, I'm going to jump into photography questions since it's the top of the hour. We'll knock out a few of these. A lot of people are really curious as to, I know you mentioned it earlier, maybe you can repeat it. What lens is best for nighttime photography in Borneo? What do you recommend?
I think for these kind of walks, and you've got a lot of animals that are sort of far away, I've done really, really well with the 70 to 200, 2.8. The 2.8 is the most important part. And then with the 200 millimeter, I can zoom in to stuff without having to get so close to them.
Okay, great.
Some of the great pictures, if I have a static animal that I can get close to, like a stick insect or a frog that's on a leaf and they're not going to go anywhere, I can get some fantastic images with a 16 to 35. But when I'm out walking around with a group and stuff, I'll either use my 100 to 400. If I had a 70 to 200, 2.8 like I used to with my Canon gear, I would take that because the lower aperture is going to gather more light, so you can have a faster shutter speed, a lower ISO, higher quality picture.
Mm-hmm. Do you recommend bringing a tripod? Is that even feasible on this trip?
I would never really use it unless I wanted to do some night photography with stars. That can be pretty cool. I didn't show any of those, but that would be the only time where I would ever really think about a tripod. It depends if you have a huge lens. Some people bring real big lenses, and it's possible to use them some places, but generally it's bright enough that usually you can hand hold everything during the day, and then at night tripod would be very difficult.
Mm-hmm. And someone's wondering whether it's worth bringing a macro lens.
Sure, you could. There would be times where you, if you had spent some time with some of the flowers and things like that. But when I'm guiding, I have enough stuff on my hands where I need to be very limited on what kind of gear I'm taking care of. So when I'm going out at night, I have, the headlamps and keeping up with people and showing them stuff and the lights and everything else. And I can just have one camera over my shoulder. I can't bother with switching lenses out too much, but you could definitely go ahead and throw it in. But none of the pictures that you saw that I showed you were taken with a macro. Not that I couldn't have done it. I just didn't. But yeah, I would bring it for sure.
And what about iPhones? How is it with iPhone photography there?
It can be fine. I mean, especially for some of these frogs and insects that are a lot closer. A lot of times people will leave their big cameras behind. I will get the fancy shots just because they don't want to have to deal with it. And then they'll just take some pictures with their iPhones. Yeah. I mean, definitely worth, and people do well with those.
Mm-hmm. And what power binoculars do you use?
I personally have a 10 by 42, but 8 by 42 would also be good as well. But 8 or 10 power.
Great. And I'll do one final question here. What's the likelihood of getting condensation inside the camera or inside your lens? Have you ever heard of that happening?
Yes, it can happen. And just the more humidity, well, the main factor in that is how sealed up is your camera. So when you get the really professional, like if you're going to go for the highest level of the lenses, like the pro version of the the white lenses of the Canons, they're going to be very, very, very sealed. So they're not going to be nearly as affected as some of the other less sophisticated lenses and cameras and things like that. So it can happen, but usually it's only very, very humid conditions, or if you've gotten your camera extremely wet in the rain and then it seeps in through the cracks. Once it gets in there, when you get temperature changes, that condensation can actually happen on the inside, and it's a problem. And one of the ways to fix that is to let it sit at night in a bag of rice. It's just as good as silica bags. Just a bag of rice. If you drop your phone in the water and you're just like, uh-oh, immediately turn that accessory, phone, camera, whatever it is, turn it off immediately. If it's a camera, take the battery out. Put it in a bag of rice and seal it up, and then let it sit there, and it will absorb, the rice will absorb all the moisture. So that's a really good trick to know.
Great tip. Thank you. All right, well, Brad, I know we could talk about Borneo for hours. There's just so much wildlife, especially when it comes to photography, but I'm going to have to call it there with questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. This was wonderful. I'm going to hand it back over to you for closing comments.
Okay, thank you guys. Once again, I'd love to see you guys out there. I'm really, really anxious for these trips in Asia to start back up again. because the economy that's with this is really this ecotourism economy, a sustainable, responsible ecotourism economy that saves habitat, saves species. And I just cannot imagine that it's gone this long for a year without, I mean, I have lots of friends around, but anyway, I'm just really hoping that we can get these programs started. Not only are they just super fun, but it's integral in the conservation of the resources. So thank you. Hopefully spurred some interest, and you guys learned a few things and enjoyed the images. Thanks. Take care, guys.
Thanks
Goodbye.
again, Brad. Thank you so much. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, and we'll have a replay available on our website soon. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.